Hello everyone. Today's video will be on the Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man movies. These movies, I really hold them close to my heart. They were the first movies I think I ever really saw. They basically inspired my love of comic books in general. So you can really say I love these movies. You know, like it'd be an understatement to say I quite like them. I'm pretty sure I still own my original copy of Spider-Man 1 on DVD. I don't know if I can play it though. It's whatever. Basically, I really like these movies, and I think they're really good. You know, but I'll let you decide that for yourself. I'm just here to give you a review what I think of the movie. If you really want to know how you feel about these movies, you should probably just watch them yourself. Because I think, and I know some people might get mad at me for this, but I think they're a bit of an acquired taste. You know, way back when they were first made, it was really easy to resonate with these movies because, you know, it was basically the first of its kind. They were campy, they were funny, but at the same time they were serious and action-packed. And I really like the atmosphere the Raimi trilogy had. I think it was a really good one, and quite honestly, I think it was the best interpretation we've had of Peter Parker in film to this day. I don't think it's the best adaptation of Peter Parker we've had, period. That one goes to Spectacular Spider-Man. If you have not watched that show, you should, or don't. I mean, as a Spider-Man fan, it's definitely a show you should watch. It's a very good show. But anyways, on to the actual review. Let's start with the first thing on this list. Plot, scale 1 to 20. I think overall, if I'm going to split these movies into, like, let's say I split this 20 into three points, you know, like I give say each movie is worth like 6 points, 6.5 points, or 6 1/3 of a point or something like that, right? So if each movie is worth that much, then I say Spider-Man 1 would be worth about 5 points, Spider-Man 2 is worth 6 points, and finally Spider-Man 3 is about 3 points. So that's basically a 14 out of 20, which I think it's actually a bit lower than my prequel trilogy one. I think I just did not rank those movies well at all, to be honest. I know I made that review like a week ago, but looking back at it, I'm like, these movies really should not have gotten an 80 out of 100. I think they were more deserving of a 70 or an 8 or a 60. But that's beside the point. Plot overall, I think a 15 or a 14. I'll be generous. I'll give it a 15 out of 20. Because, you know, mainly the points come off on Spider-Man 3. You know, it's a bit of a black sheep in between these two basically great movies. One of them I could argue is perfect. But, you know, I feel like the first two Raimi movies have near perfect plots, right? Like I just said, you know, the origin of Peter feels really in line. I like how he develops throughout the first movie. I like how he, you know, I think the plot overall is just really good. Allow me, because I'm trying to think of a good way to say what I want to say about this. You know, quite frequently I find myself, I'm not sure how to describe things. But basically, the plot is, you know, Peter, he goes to a fair, he gets bitten by a spider. You know, he realizes he's got spider powers. He goes to get himself some money to get a fancy car. His uncle dies because he wasn't responsible, and the movie goes on from there. It does a really good job of establishing Peter Parker as this science nerd, as his character is established quickly, and you can understand where his frustrations come from and why he does the things he does, right? It's made very clear. And then throughout the first after the first third, which is where I think Uncle Ben basically dies, from that point forward, you can see what drives him. So basically, we start the movie, we see him get his powers, we get the death of Uncle Ben, and from there we see his basic motivation for the rest of the trilogy, right? And I really like how they did Uncle Ben in this trilogy. The only other interpretation we have of Uncle Ben is the Amazing Trilogy, and I don't think that one was very bad. I think that one was a pretty good representation of him. Some people might clown on him saying a different version of the line, but I've never really cared about how he says with great power comes great responsibility, right? As long as he says something along those lines, as long as he said basically power and responsibility, I'm good with it, right? He could be saying it in the most dumb way possible, and I would still think it's alright, because that's the basic thing that has to be said. He has to make that clear. That's literally the only thing Uncle Ben has to do. He tells Peter power comes with responsibility, and he dies. Alright? It's not very hard to do. And obviously it comes with some development. Ben should probably have a character of some sort. But I don't think it's very hard to mess up Uncle Ben. That's not exactly a plot detail, so I'm gonna move on from that point. So let's talk about Spider-Man 2. I think this one has the best plot. It's a basically perfect plot. So basically in this movie, we see him in college. You see really the struggles of being Spider-Man. This is something a lot of people, not a lot of people, but this is something I think doesn't exactly get represented a lot in superhero media. Is basically Spider-Man's a working class superhero, right? You see Iron Man and Superman and Batman, these characters, they basically don't have to work at all. They are basically full-time heroes because, they're rich, or they have a stable income, or whatever it may be. Spider-Man doesn't have that. How people say Bruce Wayne is Batman's mask? That's not the case with Spider-Man. He is very much one singular person, and I don't think really he leads as much of a double life as you would think. He's a superhero, but he's the same person. He doesn't change his demeanor when he's in the costume or when he's out of the costume, which I do think is a problem Tobey Maguire suffers from, because while he does portray Peter alright, I think he could have done it with a bit more vigor. People tend to forget that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person, right? They expect Peter to be this whiny, nasally science kid, and they expect Spider-Man to be this charming, charismatic superhero, but they're very much one and the same, right? There's a balance there, right? Spider-Man might be charming and charismatic, but he's also a big science nerd, and he's kind of awkward sometimes, right? And that's the same way Peter is, right? He's not an incel, right? Peter, he gets it, all right? Have you read the comics? My guy he's a playboy with how many girlfriends he has, all right? He's clearly not ugly, and he clearly isn't socially inept. So I don't understand why people think he should be like stupid, or like socially stupid or whatever. It doesn't make sense. Again, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm doing that a lot in this video, and we're already 10 minutes in, so I think I'm gonna wrap up this plot one real quick. I'm just gonna talk about the third movie. This is the one where they really dropped the ball. As we all know, like, a lot of the studio executives really pushed for Venom, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Venom, but he really should not have been in the third movie. That's what really messed up the plot. I think without Venom, or without Sandman even, like, if Spider-Man 3 had 1 or 2 villains, it could have been perfectly fine. As good as the other two, maybe not, because it doesn't focus on a singular villain, but I think it would have still been a good movie, right? But now it's juggling 3 characters, 3 villains, and it doesn't have the time for all of them, right? I would say if Spider-Man 3 was like a miniseries, if it was a miniseries, I think that execution would have been really great, right? Like, you have like 9 episodes in total or something, and you have 3 episodes dedicated to Harry, 3 episodes dedicated to Venom, 3 episodes dedicated to Sandman, and it would have been clear and concise. The plot wouldn't have been like all jumbled and rushed, and it would have really made a lot more sense. Moving on to characters, I think I've said a lot about how I feel about Peter in this trilogy. I think Peter starts off as like this nasally science nerd that's a bit awkward around women and whatnot, but I feel like as time goes on, he should become a bit more confident, and that doesn't really happen in this trilogy. He basically stays the same until the third movie, and at which point he just, well, we all know how that happened, the whole symbiote street dancing thing, and that's not the way it should work. But yeah, I just think his because Peter isn't confident enough, I feel like Spider-Man suffers from that too, I think like the best quip Spider-Man ever had in this trilogy was like telling kids not to cross the road when there are cars. Like, half the quips he makes are flat or unfunny, and the other half don't exist because Spider-Man doesn't talk when he's fighting, which he absolutely has to. Like, if Spider-Man isn't talking when he's fighting, there's something wrong, right? And I mean, it's a bit of a nitpick, but like, whatever. Otherwise, I think Tobey Maguire is a great actor. I just feel like Peter needs a bit more confidence, really. That's it. And Spider-Man could do with a bit more talking overall, because I don't feel like he says anything. Like, I always, like, whenever I go back to the Raimi trilogy, I always see Peter talking, and he's always going around saying something or the other. But like, wait, why isn't Spider-Man talking? He's just not. It doesn't make sense to me. Next character, I guess the other two characters I want to talk about would be MJ and Harry. Harry is a pretty good character, I'd say. I don't like how much of a murder boner he has for Spider-Man. It makes sense, don't get me wrong, but like, at the same time, I guess this is really a problem with Peter, is he just doesn't tell Harry. And it's probably because, well, Goblin told him not to tell Harry, so he doesn't tell Harry. And that makes sense, but like, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Like, Harry just didn't think to look any closer. He just I mean, who even told him? Right? Like, Spider-Man just shows up with the glider and then he dips. Like, he never said he killed him, right? I think I would have investigated a bit. I wouldn't have just been like, well, you must have died. I mean, obviously, Harry would know he died, but like, maybe I'm being a little bit unfair because I actually have the peace of mind to say I would investigate, whereas Harry was going through a difficult time, which makes sense. But I feel like as an audience member, sometimes it feels like Harry just hates Spider-Man a bit too much. Like, it genuinely annoys me, and I guess that's what they were going for, right? Like, it's one of those things where the audience knows the character didn't kill so-and-so, but another character doesn't know that, so they just get the world's biggest hate boner, right? Nonetheless, I think Harry's a pretty compelling character up until the third movie where he just gets amnesia. Like, what? Like, that was the world's biggest cop-out, man. And then his butler just tells him out of the blue, his butler's just like, well, I mean, your father killed himself, so who are you mad at? And it's like, well, why didn't you say that from the beginning? You know, I guess again, that's not really a problem with Harry. It's just it's a problem with the butler. So really, Harry's biggest problem is no one will tell him anything. Which I find a bit amusing, but next character, MJ. I think MJ is a decent character, if not irritating at times. I have a very mixed opinion on this character. I think she's very bland. I feel like, you know, like literally just a love interest, and also like has MJ ever done anything but get kidnapped? I mean, she was in a play once, but like that was for like 10 seconds, and then she wasn't in the play anymore. She was gonna get married, but that's only because Peter wouldn't bone her. My point is, MJ is just not a very compelling character. She has one purpose, and then no depth beyond that. I mean, you could argue, like, there's some depth here and there, like you know, she had, I wouldn't say abusive parents, but dysfunctional parents, right? And she really wanted to be an actress, but she's having trouble doing that because no one will book her. Which, again, really connects to the working class struggle theme Spider-Man brings. But at the same time, again, MJ just doesn't really do anything outside of be kidnapped and be Spider-Man love interest. Right? You know, and then in the third movie, she basically gets manipulated. You know, the other reason I don't like MJ is because every movie they do this thing where they make Spider-Man and MJ, like, basically they do a will they won't they, right? And that kind of thing infuriates the hell out of me. I just want, if you're going to have a romantic interest in your superhero movie, which quite frankly I'm not fond of, but if you're going to have one in your superhero movie, just get them together, and then like, maybe, I don't know, build off of that. It just feels like, because they're not even together for a full movie before she breaks up with him. And the reason she breaks up with him is particularly infuriating to me. Is it reasonable? Yes. But is it infuriating at the same time? Of course. Because this woman really said, she came back to Spider-Man, she said, I don't care if you're Spider-Man, I still want to be with you. And then, like, what is it, like 3 months later, I can't be with you. Why? Because you're Spider-Man. Well, you knew that, right? You literally said you were okay with it. Right? And again, it's just my personal opinion. I don't think anyone really likes MJ beyond, like, no one really loves MJ's character, right? She has a singular purpose and she fulfills it, and that's it. And that's kind of a thing I've noticed with female characters in general, is that they happen to be like a bit bland. They're sometimes the weakest of their like trio. Maybe that's something wrong with me. I don't think it is, but I just notice, like female characters, like, for example, Into the Spider-Verse had this problem. Gwen was a great character, but she was definitely the weakest of her trio. Like, Miles and Peter stood out more than her. Gwen was a bit flat. The prequel trilogy had this problem as well. I think, let me see about this. Prequel trilogy had this problem as well, and those are two movies I can name off the top of my head, right? But I'm sure I can find some other ones if I look hard enough. My point is, I feel like that's just something to note. Female characters are oftentimes the weakest of their trio, per se. So yeah, execution, I'm giving this one a, what is this? Let me think. A 20. Oh, I forgot characters. Characters, I'm giving a 17. It's pretty good. Now execution, I'm giving it a 25 out of 30. The 5 points, it's really just off of Spider-Man 3. Again, like I said before, they really messed up with this movie. It had the potential to be really good. Like it really saddens me how much they messed up this movie, right? Because with, like I said before, with one or two villains, this movie really could have worked. If it was Sandman and Harry being like a 30-minute subplot or something like that, and Sandman, that could have really worked. You cut out everything with Venom, and you let Sandman have a little more time to breathe and get fleshed out a bit more, and then you dedicate, the time that had Venom, like the 30 minutes with Venom, you split that time, 15 more minutes for Harry, 15 more minutes for Sandman, or however much time that was. You split it evenly so that each character can have some like actual development, and the movie can be somewhat balanced, right? You could do one villain, but I don't really think Sam ever wanted one villain, right? I think the plan was always to have it be Harry and Sandman, or Harry and a different villain, whatever it might have been. He always intended for Harry to be a villain in this movie, which that makes sense because it's supposed to be, this trilogy, if you didn't know, was always intended as a trilogy. I know there was talks of a Spider-Man 4, but the original plan before Spider-Man 4 was even a thing was just a single trilogy, self-contained and whatnot. Spider-Man 4 wasn't decided upon until they realized how much success Spider-Man 2 and 3 were getting. So they decided, let's pump out Spider-Man 4 and 5 and 6. They ordered another trilogy, and that obviously didn't work out because we're at our third reboot of Spider-Man. Which, by the way, if you guys want me to review Amazing Spider-Man or the MCU Spider-Man, I'd be happy to. I like those versions too. Maybe not as much as this one, but I think they're both pretty decent. I'd say MCU Spider-Man is the second best interpretation of Spider-Man on film. Which I'll get into in his own video whenever that might be. So yeah, execution, that's 25. Okay, aesthetic. I feel like this one, it'll get a 9. Overall, I really like the designs for this movie. It's just that some of them were a bit campy, maybe. Like I like Spider-Man's design. I like Sandman's design. I like Green Goblin's design. But like, I guess like some of them, particularly Venom, I guess, not some of them, I think all of them have a bit of an issue in the sense like they're all really good designs, but they got that slight essence of campiness, which might just be attributed to the early late 2000s being, well, the early late 2000s. People might not, I somewhat remember the style choices of that day. They weren't the greatest. They were a bit iffy. I'm sure like our children, if I ever have children, are gonna look back at the 2020s and be like, ew, you guys wore that? Disgusting. And I'm gonna be like, well, it's better than the triple hats you kids are wearing today. But besides the point. Yeah. Aesthetic. 9 out of 10. Really the one point I'm docking off, because to be frank, I'd give this a perfect 10 out of 10. The movies are really nice to look at. The city feels alive. I love watching Spider-Man swing around the city. I love watching him fight. I like the villain's design. Really the only thing I'm docking off is Venom. I don't know if this is true, because if it is, it makes a lot of sense. It feels like Sam was intentionally trying to make Spider-Man 3 as bad of a movie as he could, which is why he cast Topher fucking Grace as Venom. Don't get me wrong, Topher Grace is a great actor, but that guy is a stick. You can't legitimately expect me to believe Topher Grace is Venom. Have you seen Venom? My guy is built like a fucking stack of bricks. Alright? Like, I'm sure Topher is ripped, but like, compared to comic accurate Venom, he's a stick. Alright? This is the one thing I like. This is one of the many things I like about Venom 2018. Venom actually looks like Venom. I know he doesn't have the white spider symbol, but like, cut them some slack, alright? They don't have the rights to it, and it doesn't make sense to have the white spider symbol, right? He gets that from Spider-Man. There's no Spider-Man. And I get that that's a problem, but again, besides the points, Venom is the problem. It's the reason I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. Let's move on. Oh wow, this is 27. This is 27 minutes long? Jeez. Okay, so I'll get through this fast and quick. As you guys might be able to tell, I think these movies are really great. I think they've got a lot of soul put into them. 20 out of 20. So yeah, 20 out of 20. Then 20 plus 9 plus 25. Let me calculate this out real quick. 20 plus 9 plus 25 plus 17 is... Oh, you know what? I'm forgetting something. 29, 25, that's 40, 30? No. Wait a freaking second. Oh, it's the plot. I forgot to give this a 18. I'm bumping the 15 to an 18. I think Spider-Man 2 is just that good. 86. That makes more sense. That makes a lot more sense. Yep. Okay, so overall, I'm giving this trilogy an 86 out of 100. Again, I really think these movies are great. And, it's really disappointing we didn't get a fourth Spider-Man film. And if the rumors are true, I'm really, and spoiler alert, yeah, I guess, because somehow there are people who still don't know this. Spoiler alert, Tobey Maguire might be in No Way Home, the third Spider-Man movie that's coming out this year. I guess a little bit of free advertising for Marvel. Please pay me tens of thousands of dollars. I just advertised your movie. Anyways, yeah, I'm really excited to see if that's true or not. And I'm just really excited for that movie in general. I'll try to see if I can watch it, and if I can, I'll get a review out to you guys as soon as possible. Obviously, I can't now because the movie is 6 months away, and, well, I can't time travel, which is disappointing, because if I could, I would go back in time, and I would kill the fish that walked up on land. So, yeah, and I'm not the first one who would do that. I'm sure I'd go back in time, and there'd be like 30 people trying to punch each other to death over who kills the fish walking onto land, or whatever. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. The usual YouTube stuff, leave a like, subscribe, yada yada yada. If there's any movies you guys would like me to review, leave it down in the comments below. I'm gonna link my Instagram as well. But nonetheless, if you guys enjoy this video, again, leave a like. I don't know why I'm repeating myself. This has been Fish, signing off. Goodbye.